The creator of Diablo, David Brevik, just recently said that he's not really vibing with the current flow of rapid action RPGs. It's actually been something that's been rattling around in my mind for a bit, so I thought I'd turn on the camera and dump some thoughts out. I have to agree with him. I think that gaming currently is focused on speed and doing everything really quickly because I think there is a belief in game development that that is what is good for everybody. I think the way that we ended up here is that you try to make products to appeal to as many people as possible. And in our modern society right now, you kind of get constant dopamine hits if you're doing something that you think is like fun or good. And so I've just seen a lot of genres transition into speed and doing everything quickly and getting like big Call of Duty type dopamine hits. I feel like that's really the root of where it started, like the first Modern Warfare, Call of Duty 4, where you started getting those like constant hits of dopamine when you're playing, right? There was way less emphasis on slower moments and round based and a lot of building up towards a big high and then you repeat that loop. No, it was like you die, you go, you sprint, you run, you kill. It's constant. You go boom, 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 boom. And in a lot of ways, I see a lot of games going towards that. And working in the industry, I see a lot of people trying to steer everything towards this like super easy to understand, right away exciting. But it's weird in a way that when you rapid fire that much stuff to the user, if everything is exciting constantly, that kind of means that's your bare minimum, which means nothing is exciting. And you see a resurgence of people wanting slower experiences, right? You have stuff like Kingdom Come, which is taking a lot of like the Bethesda-ing of the games, which each game has kind of been easier and better at engaging that like modern rapid pace. And it's slowly turning itself into to the point where when Starfield came out, a lot of people were asking who this game is for. Like, if I was looking for a deep immersive sim with a lot of physics-based stuff, you've stripped out layer after layer after layer of stuff until you're left with just the simple core of what that game is. Why are there way more people playing classic WoW than retail WoW? Why are people more excited about Path of Exile 2 than Path of Exile 4? If you look at the fundamental pillars of what these games are, the things that everybody gravitates towards is that slower paced, deliberate, interesting choice kind of gameplay. When you spend time with your character, when you spend time figuring out all the mechanics of something, when every action feels deliberate and purposeful and you're not just being visual effect blasted in your face, it just builds a connection with your character. It makes it way easier for new players to join in because that's the weird irony of it all. It's that all this speed is to get more casual people to get into it, but there's so much complexity in all this speed for someone who isn't used to video games that they actually prefer the more hardcore older style because most of the lifting in older, slower, deliberate games is more in your brain than it is in your thumbs. And the thing that you don't have when you're a new game player is the ability to move with your thumbs really fast. So then now you have way more people gravitating towards older, slower, methodical games or even newer games that take that older style and build on it with something interesting that isn't just constant dopamine hit, right? And it's been really interesting to see out. Like, take a look at Assassin's Creed, right? When you take out the complexity and you go for rapid speed gameplay, get everything quickly, Assassin's Creed, the first few games, I really enjoyed climbing because each wall was like a little deliberate puzzle, right? You climb up a wall and you can only reach one spot. So you got to move your stick to that spot. And then you turn climbing into a gameplay. Where nowadays, new Assassin's Creed is like, lets you do whatever you want. You want to go up this wall, just press against the wall, and the character will figure it out for you. Where in some ways it looks cool and it feels nice, you've stripped out an entire layer of gameplay that used to be there that people appreciated and enjoyed. It was slower. It might have looked clunky, but moment to moment, you were doing interesting things with your brain and your thumbs. You were trying to solve a puzzle of getting up a wall instead of just choosing to go up the wall whenever the heck you wanted. Of course, there's room for both of these to exist, right? But I think the old school, more deliberate, choicey kind of games are, they kind of stand the test of time, where like rapid fire ARPG, boom, 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 dopamine action is kind of short lived. There's kind of no pacing to it. You kind of just blast yourself with it and then you kind of play through it and then you get a little bit tired of it and then you kind of move on from there. And that's unfortunate. And in a way, because it's so easy to get everything done, the longevity of those games goes away. Especially for a service game, right? You need to have a meaningful way to keep people playing for a longer time. But if you're able to do everything too quickly, an example of this would be like both Destinies had that problem, right? Most people were able to finish the campaign and grind to what you needed for gear relatively quickly. And then it became a simple act of if you aren't engaged with all the systems that are there, you gave up. And if you were engaged with the systems in there, you kind of stayed, but like it became that treadmill of filling bars, which is something that I always didn't like about where modern game is going. A lot of times, service games currently, when you're going into them, it just feels like the act of filling bars, the act of doing generated quests. Everything's about filling a bar to get a reward to then use for a battle pass or something. I personally never find those interesting. While I know it makes a lot of money and that's why it keeps going right now, and things like Fortnite really like to do it, the more games that do it, the more that wears on me, right? I really appreciate the classic approach of like in classic WoW, leveling from 1 to 60 takes a very long time in itself, especially if it's your first time. If it's your 100th time and you're a hardcore player, maybe it'll take 5 or 7 days played. But that's still like 130 hours of gameplay. And that's a, when you compare that to a single player game, that is a massive amount of hours to dedicate to something. Where nowadays, if you play retail WoW, you could get to max level in like, I don't know, 8 hours, 10 hours. Like it's not a huge lift at all, especially if you know what you're doing. There's records of people getting it within like an hour. And so you have no connection to your character. You're just racing to the end and you have your guy and there's no humanness to it. There's no emotional bond that you form with any of the things that you're doing. You're just trying to fill the bar and move on with your day. While I think these coexisting is perfectly fine, it's weird that we've hard centered on that when players constantly say we want that slower thing. And now we've come to a head where AAA is getting really surprised that that is not doing it for us anymore. It's almost like as a collective of game players, we're all getting more sophisticated. We're all learning new skills. We're all getting better at playing games. So then now we slowly want the more deliberate choices, meaningful content, bespoke content, stuff that really feels touched and made by a human, that had craft and artistry in it, written authentically with real stories, with nuance and layers of personalities for characters. And then you have like the other side of the spectrum where when it's about quick dopamine hits, you have people kind of like spoofing it or doing a parody of it in like Vampire Survivors. Vampire Survivors is purposely the most dopamine hit thing ever, but it leans on it on the extreme side of that. So it's like, yes, it's deliberately that. I'm using everything I took from my gambling game experience and making this dopamine explosion of a Diablo clone. But I'm stripping out all the things that I'm trying to give you the illusion that you're playing the same old deliberate style that you used to. Now you're just playing this compact little thing on your phone. It's my go-to phone game when I'm on a plane. You compare something like Dragon Age Veilguard to Baldur's Gate 3 and just how complex Baldur's Gate 3 is, and it's capturing such a huge audience. Where Veilguard just it's such a well-made game, but it doesn't feel like it's for anybody. It's a very strange feeling. And there's like random theories as to what could have caused this, right? I always thought something that might be happening is that we have a lot of game design schools and like game design structures. And in a lot of ways, people joke about all the MBAs, the business degree people taking over companies and changing them for the worse. Sometimes it does feel like a lot of people are going into game design school learning all the same bad things, that there are rules to this shit and there are rules to games that you have to do, and they're applying it on a AAA level to a bunch of these games that kind of make them all feel roughly the same, which is unfortunate because then they become a little bit uninteresting, right? Or maybe they're doing focus tests for people who are very inexperienced and they get a lot of feedback that might be skewed and in a lot of ways that like maybe they don't trust what they're making. So then they start leaning it to be easier. They start to appease the people of getting feedback that like might not be as valid as they think it is. And then you kind of get stuck in this like too many cooks range of there are sparks of really good things in there constantly, right? But the way that it's all pieced together, the way that the meal came together isn't as good as this home cooked meal that a lovingly group of people made for you. I think that's all I really have to say about that. It's an interesting time in our industry because I think there is a room for a lot of people to come in and take a lot of market share, but there's a lot of dusting that we need to do with how games are made. And I think at the end of the day, the best thing anybody can do is just vote with your wallet, right? Because as much discourse that happens on the internet, I don't think any of it matters compared to what sells and what doesn't. That's the only metric that I tend to care about. The rest of it is fluff because most people get word of mouth. Most people don't really read into the enthusiast places. They just see a good game, hear it recommended from people, and they just buy it and they hope that it's good. And if it's not, they move on. And it's that simple. Just like movies, just like TV shows, to a lot of people, it's not a big deal. They just want to play some good games. And with that, that's all I have for today. Thank you so much. Peace.